Men's Radio. Do-do-wah-de-da, the place where men and women really speak. Do-do-wah, do-do-do-wah. Oh man, what a show. Do-do-wah-de-da. It's Men's Radio. Do-do-wah-de-da. This crazy show is on 3 times a week. Do-do-wah, do-do-do-wah. Now Russ and Phil are there to help with all your cares. We laugh, we cry, we talk like grown-ups do. But if you're sad and low, it won't cost you no dough. Men's Radio, that's the place for you. With Russ Kane and Phil Day.
Greetings and salutations, not half pop, because out of Unit 1 into Unit 2, a little bit of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and you know who, all right. This is Men's Radio Station, broadcasting all over the world, which is darn exciting, quite frankly. You can hear us on www.mensradiostation.com. You can see us and hear us on Twitter and on Facebook, and of course, go to our Men's Radio Station YouTube channel and smash the subscribe button and hit that bell to be given notifications. That's right, on the Men's Radio Station YouTube channel.
E. Fountain says hello.
Crazy name, crazy gal.
Paul Claridge says good afternoon, everyone, as does my mother, Linda David. Now, someone called, well, there's a comment here. Wow, that's an opening number and a half. And it's by somebody called Lauren Mishcon. Not sure who that is.
Lauren Mishcon. No, name's not familiar to me at all. In no way could she be even construed as my daughter. That would be ludicrous and a calumny.
Well, quite. Veronica Cullen says, hello, gents. I hope you're both well. We are. Thank you. I believe so.
Thank you, Veronica, who's a big fan of the ABC of CBD, which we're going to be talking about in a minute because our guest is live. And there's a couple of things I want to talk about before we join our guest live from Mexico. Not kidding. I don't mean Manchester. I don't
understand why you think anyone would think you're kidding.
Like, who would know, right? Who would know? I stuck my head under the tap today, so I don't know what the hell I look like. I look like sort of Percy from Happy Days.
Barry J. Allen says, blooming.
Oh. What? What have I done? What have I done now?
No, Barry J. Allen says, blooming weather.
Well, I've got sunshine. I got sunshine.
On a cloudy day.
Yeah, now there's a couple of things I want to talk about, actually of a serious nature, and I'm going to do them as quickly as I can. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, as you know, and every day on Men's Radio Station and Women's Radio Station, we concentrate on mental health and well-being, as you know. But something happened which I'd just like to throw out to all the ladies and gents all over the world, because we have listeners in France, in Germany, in New York. It's amazing. And it's this. Do you remember our guest on Friday was my pal, Danny Posthill, who is a comedian and impressionist. Yeah, Danny Posthill, you remember, he was very funny and people absolutely loved his stuff. Danny phoned me, not last night, the night before, but 10:30 at night, which I would assume means my mother's died, which is how my brain works, except she died about 3 years ago. So I still think when the phone goes after 9 o'clock at night, somebody's dead. That's how I was brought up. That's how I think. But there's loads of you think exactly the same. Any phone call after 9 o'clock, someone's dead. And it was Danny, and we were just chit-chatting, and he told me something that goes to the heart of a message that you posted this morning, Phil, something that we discuss endlessly on MRS, and it's this. He does impressions of everybody, including an impression of Diane Abbott, and he has never been so badly trolled in his life. They all came out the woodwork and accused him of being a racist and this and that and the other. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. When he does an impression of Priti Patel, when he does an impression of Suli Rushak, Chancellor, nothing. Not one comment.
Rishi Sunak, but yes.
There we go. Yeah, here. Number 17 on the menu. But without the prawns. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And he was really upset. And I said, Danny, we had a long chat for about 45 minutes. And I said, don't engage with these people. You're never going to persuade them. You're never going to change their minds. But if you take out Rishi Doodads and just say Priti Patel, so he does an impression of her, that's fine. But you can't do an impression of Diane Abbott. It's bullshit. And that's what it is. And it really upset him. And we had a long talk because A, he's a pal. We met when we were both doing the Edinburgh Fringe. But more importantly, it goes to the very heart of so many things that we say, and so many of our guests and our experts who suffer at the hands of social media. Why do people think that and they were so vile. And he just replied to one, a kind of politics. It's just shocking.
I've come up with a theory. You know how this has long sort of been the case that people think, what can we do to control social media? But I've sort of come up with a bit of a theory that I really do believe would work. And sadly, I don't think that social media would adopt it. But it could absolutely be the case that it would work quite well, I think, anyway. I think it is a case that you need to give credit card information to join social media. And if at any stage you are found to be breaching the rules by either abusing somebody or posting misinformation, even if you haven't done it knowingly, then you get fined. I think if they did that, then that way the social media giants would make even more money. So it would be a thrill for them because they'd love it. You know how on the edge they are. They live on a knife's edge. I feel very sorry for them. So
I don't know how they make it. I don't know how they make it pay.
Yeah, no, they would earn even more money, and it would be one heck of an incentive for people just to behave on social media. But anyway, let's not.
They're not even using their real. They're not even using their real names.
Oh no, I know exactly.
They hide behind some pathetic little pseudonym.
Yeah, no, exactly. Therein lies the problem. You see, if you had to register a credit card for that, then obviously you'd have to give the name on the credit card, and they would have to flag saying, "Well, clearly you're not that person." Alternatively, I would suggest as well that if it's an organization, I think the organization needs to apply for a license to broadcast and to use social media, register them.
Do you know what, Phil? That is
so flipping obvious.
That's a bloody good idea.
It is so flipping obvious. Okay, it would take a long time to trawl through the millions of people who use social media, but my God, it would filter out the rubbish accounts, that's for sure. Because then you'd have an exact pathway back to whoever it is who is trolling. And I have every intention of putting that forward to the social media giants and see what we can do with that, because I think that something's got to give. And another reason why, of course, that Ross, I know that you brought this up, is that you may have seen, some people may have seen anyway, that I have decided to... hang on a second. Phil, good try, but that's silly. Let's get their addresses. Well, Ed, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I don't think it is silly. I think you'll find...
Ed, what are we going to do? Go around like the old days in the 30s and Whitechapel with a baseball bat? We'd love to, but we can't do it. You know
something's got to give, and it cannot carry on the way it is. I mean, one of the reasons why I have sort of announced this morning that I've decided to take a step back from social media indefinitely, and I know I've said this before, and
is it because you're very, very boring?
Yes, I sort of crawled my way back to social media just in case, just thinking actually I'm sure it'll be fine this time, and it really did not. And it's all of the nonsense that's being posted about the Middle East at the moment. I'm so sick. I mean, you could argue it's sort of like the original case of everyone's an expert. And this was sort of the original case of it, is when people were posting stuff about the situation in the Middle East. I can pretty much guarantee that half of the fools out there who are posting saying that Israel is an apartheid state and quoting all sorts of things saying that they go around killing children deliberately is from individuals who, frankly, have never even so much as stepped foot inside Israel. They have not got a clue what they're talking about. If I tell you it's one of the most incredible countries I've ever visited, then that's up to you to either believe me or not believe me. I don't really care. I'm the one who benefits from knowing what an amazing place it is. But I would say that when you have a situation where a terrorist cell, such as Hamas, who, by the way, is one of the UK's enemies, let's not forget that. If Hamas are bombarding Israel at the moment with a load of rockets and trying to kill innocent civilians, I would say that that is actually potentially cause for concern and not cause to lambast the Jewish state. Oh, wait, could it be because it's a Jewish state?
No, not at all. It's got nothing to do with it. If it was a Catholic state, it'd be fine. Here's the thing, and I don't want to keep our guests waiting much longer, but it has to be said. And you might be thinking, well, this is politics. No, this is mental health. The thing that happened to Danny Poe still really badly affected him and got him upset and annoyed. when I see what goes on, I get furious. Phil's had to take a step back. I just dip in, contact the people I need to contact, and get the hell out of Dodge as soon as I possibly can. And I try not to do politics. All of it is about mental health.
Actually, I tell you how. So I know that this is going quite badly. Actually, I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I figure I will say it actually, because it's kind of affected me more than I thought it would do. And I haven't actually even told my family this. I was in town yesterday. They knew I was in town, but on the way back from town, I was in Oxford Circus tube station, and there were two charming individuals who have. Oh, right. Well, let's not get into that, Ramsey. It's a load of nonsense. I'm sorry. Anyway, right. There were two individuals who were on the staircase or on the escalator blocking the way. And they heard, as I was walking down the escalator, and they realized that I was on the route down. And so one of them moved to one, and one of them actually said to the other who was blocking the way, because of course, to anyone who's got half an ounce of decency would know you're supposed to stand to the right when using the escalator in the underground. He did say,
tricky.
He did say, "Oh, mind out." Anyway, I turned the other way because one of them, strangely enough, wasn't wearing a mask, so I didn't really want to breathe the same air. Looked the other way, carried on walking down, and just because I didn't thank him for doing what he should have done in the first place, he saw the black hat, assumed my religion, and started saying, "Jew, oi, Jew, Jew, Jewish, oi."
Is that what he was?
Genuinely.
What sort of person was this, by the way? I
have absolutely no idea who this individual was, but I actually, for the first time,
I don't know his name and address, but what sort of person? What sort of age was he?
I don't know, probably late teens, early 20s. Might I suggest that what was extraordinary is that he didn't know I was Jewish. He just saw the hat and assumed it. Just assumed it.
Yeah, and the pieces and the tefillin, but apart from that.
Yeah, exactly. So
what did you do, Superman?
I just quickly shot off. I just wasn't going to stick around. For the first time in my life, I actually experienced an anti-Semitic sort of attack on me. And I've never had that before. So that's how I know how dire the situation is at the moment. But anyway, look.
We can all thank that prick Corbyn for it as well. It has to be said, and that's all there is to it. Right. Let's show with Ollie Mammon. Let's introduce our guest, and I'll do the introduction because I've had the pleasure of meeting her twice on air. And by the way, I am using a phone, so I can't read your comments. So if you're wondering why I'm not making my usual interaction with you, I can't see any comments coming up. So sorry about that. Leave it all to Phil. Now, every Thursday at 6 o'clock, we do a show called the ABC of CBD, with an extraordinary fellow called Oliver Mammon, who heads up a company called the Tincture Club. And it's all about cannabinoids and, as far as I'm concerned, the medical use of hemp and cannabis, etc. And people seem to love this show. It's, to my amazement, it's up for an award in America. It is a groundbreaking show. We've done now over 6 months of these shows, and I'm very proud of them. The guests are all extraordinary, articulate, and amazing. But one guest in particular just resonated with me for her amazing story, her bravery, her tenaciousness, and the way that she's confronted an enormous problem and keeps on smiling and keeps on going. And she joins us now live from Mexico. May we introduce Callie Blackwell. There she is. Callie, good morning to you. I know it's very early in Mexico. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, really, you're welcome. Thank you for having me again, Russ. It's lovely to be here.
Well, you look very well, which is always a very good start. Now, Phil hasn't had the pleasure of meeting you, apart from when we were messing around before the show. But your story is just amazing. You are a powerhouse. And I wanted, because the people who don't watch ABC of CBD, it's a slightly different audience than what we normally have. And I wanted them to experience the full Callie Blackwell show, as it were. So, Callie, walk us through it, because it's an amazing tale.
Well, we've only got less than an hour now, Russ. So
yeah, I do know, but you carry on and just give us the Reader's Digest version.
You're gonna have to be much quicker than I was last time. Yeah. So basically, in 2010, my son was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Then again in 2012, he was diagnosed with a much rarer cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma. There was only 50 cases ever documented since records began. And at the time that he had Langerhans cell sarcoma, there was only 5 people here. He was the 5th person in the world to have this type of cancer. He was actually the only person in the world to have the 2 cancers together. The other 4 people had it as their own singular primary cancer. So they didn't know what to do with him. They had no idea. He'd already been through 18 months of chemotherapy. And so they decided on bone marrow transplant, because after going in on a genetic level, they discovered that both cancers had basically come from the bone marrow. So in order to prevent either cancer coming back, because the leukemia had gone into remission with chemotherapy, and the Langerhans cell sarcoma it was his tonsils that had turned into tumors. And so they were cut out, and he lost part of his soft palate as well because it kind of spread.
Yeah. And how old was he at this point, Callie?
So he was 12 by this point.
Okay.
And then they decided on bone marrow transplant. And so that entailed another 5 months of intensive intensive chemotherapy, firstly, adult doses, new drugs he'd never had before. Their words were, "We don't know what to do with him. We have no protocol. So we're going to give him everything we can without killing him." So they really. And
this is in the United Kingdom, just to.
Explain. Yeah. This is back in this was back in Norfolk, in Addenbrooke's, and then we had to go over to Bristol after he had his 5 months of intensive chemo, which was real touch and go. There was almost a couple of times there that he didn't pull through, and he had his first bone marrow transplant on March the 1st, 2013, and. That one failed. And then the second one failed. And then the third one, which was his own cells, because they decided by this point that there was no point giving him any more donor cells, because there was such it's called graft versus host disease, where basically if you have a kidney transplant, then your body, your immune system sees that kidney as a foreign object and it tries to expel it. So you have to go on immune suppressants and things like that to stop your body rejecting. When it's your entire immune system that is new, it sees your entire body as a foreign object. So it attacks everything. And his skin, from his mouth all the way around to the other end, was just everything in between was really affected by this attack by his new immune system. So they kind of said, look, there's really no point. So we'll give him his own cells back. Nobody's ever failed from their own cells, so this won't be an issue. Darren had his 3rd transplant, and lo and behold, it failed. There was an anomaly went on. There was something they'd never seen before, which I heard a lot during his cancer journey was, we've never seen this before. We've never seen this before. And so thankfully, sadly, after that 3rd one failed as well, thankfully somebody had the good sense, before he had all the radiotherapy and the chemotherapy, they took a big sample of his own bone marrow. Someone had the good sense to split that in 2. So thankfully, Darren had a 4th and final chance. And they said, look, we'll give him more chemotherapy, make sure his bone marrow is completely eradicated. We'll give him his 4th and final transplant. If this one doesn't work, there is nothing. We have nothing left. And lo and behold, he had that one, and everything was going swimmingly. 3 days after his 4th and final transplant, he trapped his fingers down the side of his bed. He picked up 3 catastrophic infections, 2 in his hand, 1 in his mouth. And his brand new trying to function immune system was just battered. It could not keep up with the draw on his body from these infections in his hand. And it went through to the point where he ended up having, they wanted to amputate his hand because his infection was so bad. I mean, it looked like frostbite all down the fingers. It was pretty grim. And they wanted to amputate, and I said, look, just sever the nerve. So that's what they did. They warned me he'll never use his hands again. He'll never feel his hands again. And I said, doesn't matter. The boy's dying. We just want him to die pain-free.
Leave him intact, yes.
Yeah, we just want him to die pain-free and intact. I don't, you've already taken so many parts of his body away. Just leave him be. And so they said to us, nobody has ever engrafted after 50 days. So if the bone marrow hasn't taken by day 50, it's never going to happen. And this is the moment that we're looking for. It got to day 46 and there was nothing in there. There was his infections were just ravaging his body. The only thing keeping him alive, they told me, were antibiotics. And I likened it to a conscious life support machine, because he was awake. He was aware. He knew what was going on. He just had his 14th birthday on December the 1st, 2013. And they said to us, there's nothing now, there's nothing we can do. So we had that dreaded conversation, which had been kind of slowly creeping up anyway. If this doesn't work, then things aren't looking good, but we still have a little bit of time. And so it got to the point where there's nothing left for us to do. We are sending you to a children's hospice where Darren can finish his final days, and this is the end of the road for you. And I said to them then, I said, well, how long are we talking? Once we take him off the antibiotics, how many days are we talking? How many days do I have left with him? And they said 3, a week at most.
3
days, a week at most.
I'd forgotten that bit, Callie. Oh my God.
Yeah, they said 3 days a week at most. So we left for this on December the 11th. We went to the children's hospital. I unplugged him from the conscious life support machine, and started to count down the 3 days, and we had Christmas on December the 14th. The hospice made an amazing Christmas for us. It was beautiful. And then Darren just kind of hung around and he didn't really go anywhere for a little while. And we had another Christmas, to which I said to him, I was like, mate, if you hang around for another Christmas, I'm not buying you even more presents. It's like, I can't afford to do this. But he hung around, and I started to get a little bit suspicious, as like, maybe this isn't the 3 days a week that they told me. So I said to them, it got to around about day 69. Day 69.
So they've given you, just to underline this, they've given you, say, you've got 3 days left with your son before he dies. 69 days later, your son is still there.
Well, this was around about day 50. So this would have been 19 days later. He's still there. 19 days after they told us this, he's still there. He started to get very, very anxious, because by this point he just wanted to die. He'd had enough. And this, you're going to die any minute now, it's like, well, it was very, very difficult for him. And myself too, I was like, well, hang on a minute, you told me 3 days a week at most, 19, almost 3 weeks later, we're still here, what's going on? I said, they were telling me his organs were shutting down, which they were. His stomach was shutting down. He was producing a pint of bile every half an hour. I was having to aspirate it from a nose tube he had in his face. Everything was slowing down. His infections were still, as far as we knew, were getting worse. He had bandages. He looked like Mickey Mouse. And, they said to us, don't take those bandages off, because underneath there, we've gone virtually down to the bone, and it needs to be done under surgical conditions. So don't take the bandages off. I said, okay, So he would, keep his hand up all the time when we had a shower and things like that. And so day 69, I said to them, look, he's still here and he's getting very anxious. I just need to know for absolute definite that there's nothing in his bone marrow. I said, I know we've done blood tests and there's nothing in there, but I want to know from the source that there's nothing in his bone marrow. I said, before we go on with this. And so they took him into hospital and did a bone marrow aspirate, which they go into the ball joint of the hip, and they go in with a big fat needle. It's about this long and it's very thick. And they go in under general anesthetic, because under a general anesthetic, I mean, his back is like a pin cushion. You can see all the holes where they've kind of gone in over the years. And they came back to me later that day and said to me, there's nothing in there. We're really sorry. And I said, no, it's okay. You told me there was nothing, and I just needed confirmation. And so did Darren. Darren was like, I just want to know. And I hope. We actually had the conversation where he said, I hope there's nothing in there. And I said, so do I. And he said, because I've just had enough now. He said, because if there's something in there, they're going to start prodding and poking me again. And I just don't want this anymore. And I said, I know. And I don't want to watch it anymore. And we had the conversations of me putting a pillow on his face. We had conversations of putting him out of his misery, because it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. And so on day 69, that happened. And that evening, he was just beside himself. He'd been beside himself for a number of nights leading up to this. And they'd been giving him morphine, and they'd been giving him sleeping tablets. And he had specifically said on his death plan, I don't want to die on morphine. He said, Mum, they took everything else from me. They're not having my death. I want to experience it. I want to feel that transition. I want to know what's happening. I want to go into whatever comes next, compos mentis. I don't want to be in a daze. So on his death plan, that it specifically said, I do not want to die on morphine. So when they started to increase the morphine, which is part of the Liverpool pathway care plan, is a lot of sedation towards the end of life, And then a drug called midazolam as well, which is there for anxiety surrounding death. But again, it's just a very, very strong sedatory drug that actually slows down the respiratory system enough that it will kill a person. And they actually said to me, we have this drug midazolam that if things start getting, if he starts really suffering, we can speed up the process. And I said, that's euthanasia. And they said, no, we'll just speed up the process. And I was like, no, that's euthanasia. And they drew that drug up twice for my son. They had it ready, waiting twice. And on the 2 occasions, something occurred that he was like, he didn't need it. And it was a very, very, very close situation to him not being here any longer. And so the anxiety was just horrendous. And I had already previously, about a month earlier, made him a tincture from cannabis, because during the time when his hand was in such an amount of pain and he was on fentanyl patches, he was on morphine, he was on everything they could give him, and it wasn't working on the pain. So to try and prevent surgically sterilizing his hand, I said to him, look, I found this other drug called Bedrocan, and it really works for pain, apparently. I've been doing lots of research, and they said, no, we can't give him that. It's not licensed for children. And I thought, well, no, neither's chemotherapy, but we do that anyway, And I was like, so you're not going to be willing to try this? And they said, no, we can't. So I looked at the main ingredient of Bedrocan, and I knew that it was cannabis, and I thought, well, do you know what? I'll just make something. So myself and my ex-husband got this tincture together, and I put it in a vape pen, actually, because I didn't know any better. I was very, very naive back then. Put it in a vape pen, gave it to him in the hospital. Didn't do anything. Just wasn't strong enough. Did nothing. So I put it down.
So are you in hospital? Is Darren at this point in hospital or in hospice?
In hospital. When I gave him the pen, he was in hospital. Okay. This was pre-surgical here. This is what I was trying to prevent. But it just wasn't strong enough. So I still had this tincture, but I dismissed it because I was like, well, it doesn't work. So I tried, I failed, move on. And so now at this point, when he's so anxious and they're talking about midazolam and more morphine, and I was like, no, I have to stand up for his last dying wish. Out of all of these 4.5 years that's got us to here, his last dying wish is to not die on morphine. I have to do something about that. That was my focus. And so I thought to myself, well, cannabis is good. It chills you out too, right? It chills you out. People use it for sleep. And I thought, well, I saw the jar of tincture, and I thought, I'm just going to put a load in his mouth. I'm just going to see what it does and put a load in his mouth. What harm can I do? I can't kill him. He's already dying. So I was at a point where I had nothing left to lose. And the legalities of it, I didn't care. It really meant nothing. And so I drew up 5 ml of this syrupy tincture stuff, and I put it into his mouth. And within half an hour, I watched this kind of wave go over him, and I watched him relax and sit back in his bed, and his shoulders dropped and his breath started to slow down. And he looked at me and said, yeah, I'm good. I don't need anything else. I'm good. And for me already, it was a miracle. For me already, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is going to give him the death that he deserves, the death that we all deserve after seeing all this for how many years, a death that's pleasant and one that he wants, And so I really did panic, though, because about 10 minutes later after that, the nurse came to the door with this drug called cyclazine that he'd become incredibly addicted to. I mean, 9 months of him screaming at nurses if they weren't there on dead on time with it, because it was like heroin. He got so addicted to the feeling that it gave him that he wanted it all the time. But the feeling it gave him only lasted about 10 minutes. So within 10 minutes, he's asking for it again, And she turned up at the door with this cyclazine on the tray. And I thought, oh, my God, what have I done? What if she gives him that and it has a contraindication and I am now the one responsible for finishing him off?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't need to worry, because Darren turned around and said, oh, you can take that away. I don't want it. And I looked at her. I looked at her. She looked at me, and I said, just take it away before he changes his mind. And for me, that was the pivotal kind of wow, because I'd seen him for 9 months on cyclazine. I'd seen what he was like, and I just thought, okay, this is incredible. And So that night he got a really good night's sleep, and I continued to give it to him. They withdrew the morphine, they withdrew the sleeping tablets, the cyclozine was gone. He was now on absolutely nothing, no painkillers.
Caddy, let me just jump in. Did they not say to you, Mrs. Blackwell, this is a bit of a miracle. Do you have any explanations why your son has suddenly come back like Lazarus? Did they not say?
No, because at this point his organs and everything were still shutting down. So as far as they was concerned, he was still dying. He just didn't want this cyclozine anymore. And I did tell 2 of the hospice nurses who I got very, very close to, because you do get very close to people in those kinds of situations.
I know.
Yeah. So I got very close to these 2, and I told them what I'd done, and they called it the miracle under the bed, because I was keeping the jar under the bed, and they watched as it changed. Palliative care for them just completely had they got a completely different viewpoint of it. So this was now day 70, day 71, day 72, day 78. The days went past, and I just kept giving it to him. And then on day 75, we sat in the lounge and we were watching TV, and Darren was asleep, and he had his hand, the bandaged hand, in between his legs, and he's woken up and he's pulled his hand out. And I thought no more of it. And he went, Mum, look. And I said, what's happened? And he said, look at my finger, like this. And I went, and I just saw, I was like, I don't understand. What do you mean, look at your finger? And he said, Mum, look at my finger. And this was a finger that had previously had a bandage on it. And I grabbed his hand and I went, oh my God, because his finger looked like mine, but just much, much thinner. And it had no nail on it. And I looked at his hands and I said, well, this is impossible, because you can't regrow skin cells without a functioning immune system. And they told me 5-6 days ago there was nothing there. So what on earth is going on? So the nurses obviously come in, and the doctors are then called in, and everyone's like, oh my God, what's going on? And I was like, and they said, we need to do a blood test. And I said, there's no point doing it. Like, so 6 days ago, there was nothing in there in his bone marrow. So it sure is not in his blood, And they said, we need to do a blood test. And they did a blood test. And so 5-6 days previously, his neutrophil count, and your neutrophils are just one of the 5 white blood cells that you have in your body. And the neutrophils are the ones that they look at most. It's the most prevalent one for fighting infection. And it's the one marker that they kind of judge on. And 6 days previously, his neutrophil count had been 0.0005, which is negligible. There's nothing there. And now his neutrophil count in his blood was 0.25. And they scratched their heads. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. They then took my ex-husband down into the office and shredded the do not resuscitate forms that I'd filled in. I'd done all the do not resuscitate. That was it. He was on his own. And they shredded that. And the doctor came into Darren's room to tell him the amazing news. And they said, Darren, you're not dying anymore. This is amazing. What do you want us to do? And he said, I want you to leave me the alone. And the doctor went, well, that's rather flippant, And I said, well, hang on a minute. Like, literally half an hour ago, you're telling him that he's dying, and now you're telling him he's not. And you expect a 14-year-old boy who's just been through he's laying in bed in a hospice, still feeling like death because his organs are still trying to recover. And I said, and you want him to be like, I said, you need to understand here. And so, they decided he wasn't dying. He officially engrafted with his red blood cells. Well, he produced his own red blood cells on day 104. So 54 days after, they said there's no chance ever. They then dismissed him. They then took him out of the hospice and said, you don't need to be in a hospice anymore. You're not dying. You don't need to go back into hospital, but we need you nearby. So they put us in a hostel with 16 other families. All of us went into one tiny little room. And that was horrendous. A hostel. Yeah. It was a hostel for families with sick children, but every other family in that place were really at the very beginning of their journey. We had just bounced back from the end, and we just walked in there absolutely traumatized, and they completely left us to it. They really did. They didn't know what to do, so they just did nothing. And and then Darren, sadly, this is a part I didn't get to the chance to, Russ, is that sadly, after this, Darren then tried to kill himself because this whole, well, if I'm not dying, they're going to start prodding and poking me again. And that's what they did. They started prodding and poking again, and they're doing blood tests and, giving him more blood transfusions and talking about more drugs and this, that, and the other. And he was like, I don't want it. Leave me alone. And we had to resist quite heavily, actually, to any of that. And so his choice of suicide was starvation. And he decided he was just going to go on hunger strike, and that was the way that he was going to do it. I had him for the following 6 months after that. I had him on suicide watch. I took belts away. I took shoelaces away.
Oh my God!
I was absolutely terrified that I was going to find him hanging one day. And after everything we'd been through, those final 6 months were actually the hardest of all of the time before that, because cancer's one thing. You kind of end up. I liken it to you end up on a roller coaster ride you never bought a ticket for and you can't get off. But this was something different. This was now Darren's choice. And I said to him, I would plead with him just to eat something. And he refused point blank. And he said, Mum, you have to understand that I was on the precipice. I was stood on the threshold of a door where I looked through and everything I'd ever wanted was right in front of me. My BMX, my PlayStation, running around in the fields like I used to as a kid, climbing trees. That was right in front of me. And he said, someone slammed the door in my face and I had to turn around and look at hell. I didn't want to, Mum. And he hated me for a little while, actually, for saving his life. He hated me because I had dragged him back into the depths of hell. And he wasn't,
from where he wanted to be.
From where he just
let me tell you that you absolutely the comments coming in here. I tell you, we could spend the rest of the show doing this, but just to pick out a few, and may I say, you've got some superb publicists out there. Good. Georgina Yates is saying, read Callie's book, The Boy in 7 Million. It is incredible. This woman and her son, an unbelievable example of strength and courage. My mother, Linda Dave, who is absolutely not being paid to do this for you, says, okay, you and your son are so brave. It never ceases to amaze me how strong people can be. Veronica Curran, The Boy in 7 Million by Callie Black. Oh, wow, what a book. Amazing beyond words. Callie does oils and her new range is amazing. Act for CBD. I started my oils back in December 2020. In the new range, only 1 week in, I have a huge difference in my health journey and also in sleep. This lady is amazing, dedicated to each and every one of us. And then who else have we got here? Juliet McDermott, incredible story. Melanie Hutchins, wow, this is so amazing. Ed Grossman says, Callie, may I ask you how you got... Oh, Ed's onto a drug deal here. He says, Callie, may I ask how you got the cannabis and what you did with it? Did you make something from it? You are truly inspirational. Your strength is wonderful. Paul Rose, how the hell is this miracle illegal? Oh, Paul, that's the whole other...
See, this is the whole reason that, Phil, the reason I wanted Callie to come back, and this is the third time I've had the pleasure of having her on a show on Men's Radio Station, is there's several reasons. One, she's one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. And one day, when you get back from Mexico, it'd be lovely to meet you face to face.
You'll have to come here.
I don't need asking twice. I'll be on the plane this afternoon, quite frankly, the way I'm feeling at the moment. Right. So first of all, she's an amazing person. Secondly, I know that a lot of our regular viewers and listeners don't watch ABC of CBD. They think it's kind of a niche show. But when somebody of the caliber with this extraordinary story of courage and medicine and love, and it takes you to the very extreme of the human condition, the very extreme, I wanted it to be shared because it goes to the very heart of everything we want to do on men's radio and women's radio too. So I wanted to share that, and also to show that the ABC of CBD and everything that Ollie does, Ollie Mammon, etc., it's not just a load of stoner hippies wandering around saying, look at the colours, man, listening to some bloody Pink Floyd album. It's about...
Nothing wrong with Pink Floyd.
I hate Pink Floyd. It's just because I hate Pink Floyd. I loathe Pink Floyd, and I would happily punch Roger Waters in the face, but that's another story. Phil knows why. Phil knows why.
Might I say, Roger Waters to one side, Pink Floyd were okay. So.
Yeah, I just don't like him. I love Nick Mason. He's a lovely, lovely man and a car fanatic. That's it. The thing is this: it's about what the use is, and you are the living example, and Darren is the living example of what can be done.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't understand. I stopped giving him the cannabis. You see, once his immune system came back in and he was no longer like at danger of dying there, I stopped it. And so the whole him trying to kill himself went on for 6 months, and it got to the point where they were actually saying, you know, we're going to sedate him, section him, and force feed him. This is how we're going to deal with him. And I said to them then, I said, can we have some mental health care? Because he's had nothing. He's had no counselling, no
and neither have you, Callie.
And I still haven't.
Neither have you.
No,
and I think
I'm going to
ask the question. Can I just take the focus away for a second from Darren and put it back on you, because you're very self-effacing. How are you still standing?
Do you know, I think during the time that that Darren was really, really sick, I drew a lot of strength from him. And also as a parent, I think, and especially as a mother, you know, I'm not going to negate what fathers have. Fathers have their own connections with their children, but as a mother who's carried and grown that child, and you just go into autopilot, and you go into the mode of, well, I can't falter right now because my son needs me, and that's it. And we drew a lot of strength from each other. And I went through a very spiritual experience with him and his illness. I really did. And I'd say an awakening. And so by the time, you know, that he was trying to kill himself and everything, we'd already got to this point where I'd kind of accepted that he was already going to die. But I didn't want him to. Obviously, I was fighting against that. But it was only after we came back from Spain, actually. So just quickly, because I'm going to go back to Darren just ever so slightly, because I just feel I need to finish. Go ahead. Because I need to finish off the story. Yeah. I know. Is that with them wanting to sedate him and section him and giving him no mental health care, I was then offered an opportunity to go to Spain. Russell Howard actually said, "Do you want to borrow my parents' villa? You can go to Spain for a couple of weeks." And we were like, "Yes." So we went, and we spent 2 weeks there. But after the first day, I met up with a cannabis activist who'd actually been helping people with oils and things like that for a number of years. And they met up with me, and they gave me a syringe of the oil, actually the oil that everybody talks about, the FICO, the RSO, whatever you want to call it. And I gave Darren a tiny amount of that the following morning. And within half an hour, I was prepping some lunch, and I said, you know, I'm making some lunch. Does anybody want anything? And I was expecting the usual grunt of no from Darren. And Darren went, "Make me loads, I'm starving." And it gave him the munchies so bad that he didn't stop eating for 12 hours that day. 12 hours the next day, the next day, the next day. And we went on for a 2-week period of he just ate and ate and ate, and he couldn't stop eating. We got back to the hospital in the UK, and the hospital said, "My God, he doesn't want to die anymore." I said, "I know." And she said, "His mental health is improved by 300%. I don't know where she got that figure from, and I said, "Yes, I know." And she said, "And he's put on 4 kilos. I said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "My God, that holiday did him world of good." I said, "Yes, it was the holiday," because I wasn't going to tell them what I'd done, because social services is a very real threat, especially when you're dealing with a minor, which Darren at 14 still was. Yeah. So I continued, and Darren has been on oil every single day since June 2014. Every single day he's been on oil. His hand, he now has full range of movement. He can feel everything bar the fingertips. It's called neurogenesis. He's got things that were irreparable that have been repaired. He goes back in for his tests every year. They're looking for the long-term side effects of the radiotherapy and the chemotherapy he's had. And over the years, it should get worse, and it should decline to the point where at 10-year mark, he should have cataracts, liver failure, all these things. Yeah. He's going up, and they can't understand it. And he says to them, he goes in and goes, "Because I'm taking cannabis oil." And they're like, you know, but it was the October 2014, going back to me now, the October 2014 that I had a nervous breakdown, because it got to that point where Darren was okay. He seemed to be getting better. He wasn't dying anymore. He wasn't my main focus anymore. Then the focus everything just went crash down on me. Yep. Yeah, everything just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I had a nervous breakdown. I ended up going to the hospital. I had an ECG because I thought I was having a heart attack. It was anxiety and panic and all of these things. And they started to write me out prescriptions for all of these. "Oh, just this, and we'll give you this, and this will do." And I just went, "Whoa, no. I've seen what pharmaceuticals do. No, thank you. I've seen what cannabis can do. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go home, and I'm taking some of what my son's having." And I went home, and I started to consume cannabis on a more regular basis, and it sorted me out. It saved my life as well, as far as I'm concerned. And
Callie, can I just just because I know, because this isn't the ABC of CBD, which has an audience which is kind of much more educated in that field. I just imagine that most of many of our listeners are thinking you're sitting there rolling up a joint and watching the television, except the television's off.
I don't watch the TV.
It's like, what are you're taking an oil. I just want to be sort of clear for everybody.
Yeah,
you're taking an oil here.
Yeah, I take oils, but I also do smoke cannabis. I smoke cannabis in its purest form, with no pesticides, no herbicides, no tobacco. I make sure that the papers I roll in are unbleached and hemp. I do everything I keep everything as natural as possible. It's a herb, it's a plant. It's not anything to be demonized. What we've seen over the years is that high THC strains, and THC is the compound that will make you high. It's a psychoactive compound. Now, over the years, what we've done is we've taken the land races, which there were around about 5. We've taken those natural land races, which are very balanced in all of their cannabinoids, and we've manipulated it. And we've manipulated it so it's really, really high in THC. There's virtually no CBD in there. And that's where the problem stems from, because that's where issues come from. Not it doesn't have the appropriate amount of CBD alongside the THC, and that's what can cause an issue. So this is why, again, I now have, as Veronica was saying, I now have my own CBD brands, because obviously I can't bring out a THC, unfortunately, because it's illegal. But I do have my own CBD brand, because I've seen how just amazing how CBD is as well for people. And also I understand that there are a lot of people that consume cannabis, and really the only cannabis they can get is high in THC. So my oils will complement their already cannabis use if they are already a cannabis consumer. My CBD then can go a long way to help them balance everything out. And that's what people need. They need a balance. And you're not going to get a balance from street weed. And you're not going to get a balance from a drug dealer. It's not going to happen.
This is the thing. This is, we've done, Ollie and I have done, I don't know, 32, 36 shows now, and it's been a huge educational journey. But what you're saying, and what I didn't understand at the start of this series, is that we are not talking about sitting in the back of a BMW with blacked out windows and the skunk smell when I'm walking the dog blows your face off. We're not talking about that. That is not medicinal.
We are most certainly not condoning that kind of behavior either. And look, we do have to make it very clear, and you've got to forgive me for saying this.
No, it's okay.
But the awful truth is that whether we like it or not, there are very strict laws in this country surrounding the use of cannabis. And, on your own head be it if you want to risk those laws. But at Men's Radio, we can never encourage you to break the law, no matter what it's for. And we have to say that. We have to say
However, I do I understand your stance on that. However, when a law is unjust, we have a moral obligation to break it. And when people's lives are changed by THC specifically, because it's THC that actually is responsible for apoptosis in cancer cells, when there is a bigger picture, it's like, I think there's a law that states if there's like 10 of you on a boat and one person tries to kill the other, you can kill him and it's okay because it's for the greater good. And so actually there's if I hadn't have given him that illegal substance, he would have died. And actually his death is far worse than me giving him cannabis even at 14 years old, So, and I understand, I absolutely get that there's, the legal parameters, but it's a law that I've been fighting against since 2014 because I've seen what it's done for my son.
Ali, you have to understand, I promise you one thing, we're with you,
Oh, I know.
The law must change to sort of suit medical needs without a shadow of a doubt. It absolutely must not work in favor of those who are just drug users, that's for sure. But in terms of those who can medically benefit from it, there's no doubt in my mind that something's got to give. But just from the point of view that we have to say, obviously for legal reasons,
I know.
And it's also virtually, it feels quite right, and I wouldn't argue with him what he's saying. And also during ABC of CBD, I often have to pull Ollie back and say, hang on a minute, because I don't want the station associated with that. But I will always, and we will support anything that assists mental health. Give us an update now. How is your son? How's he doing? Where is he? What's going on?
So he now lives in Durham with his girlfriend, and he's 21. He'll be 22 this year. He's on no pharmaceuticals. He's been pharmaceutical free since January 2014. He takes cannabis oil every single day. And then there's another reason why I fight so hard against the laws is because, my son is at risk of going to prison, sadly, just for keeping himself well. And, so he's an amazing human being. He's been through his own issues. He's got chronic, absolute severe PTSD from everything he went through. And so he's put himself through some therapy, and he's managed to get on top of that. And he's just doing very well. He's just learning how to live again, I guess. it's been a long journey to recovery, and it's taken almost longer to recover than it did for the initial amount of treatment that he had, you know. But he's a well-rounded young man now who hopefully one day will find his place in the world. He finds it very, very difficult because nobody understands him. There's only a handful of people who in the world have got that close to death and been, you know, he planned his funeral, he planned the costumes we were all going to wear because it's fancy dress, he planned the music, the hearse, the venue, everything. And he even wrote a will and left his PlayStation to his friends, and you know, and things like this.
I am going to start crying in a minute.
He'd accepted it. He'd accepted it, and he welcomed it. And so,
and is he able, Callie? Is he able to work and have a vaguely normal life, or?
He struggles. He does have some things still wrong with him. In fact, he can't stand up for very long because some of the drugs they gave him have twisted his bones in his legs, and so he can't stand up for very long. And that's something that needs surgical reparation. Cannabis isn't gonna do that, sadly. But it has done an awful lot to repair all of these things they said were irreparable. Most of them have been repaired now. He is infertile, sadly, but he's not that bothered. He never wanted children anyway. But to go into normal life and to get a normal job, he really struggles with normal people because he just feels that nobody can understand him. He really struggles with other humans, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So he's quite insular. He's a bit of a hermit. He doesn't leave his house very often, and you know, he's. I'm trying.
Let me ask you this: Is he glad he's alive?
Now I think he is. I think for a long time he wasn't, and I think for many years actually. I think it's only been in maybe the last 18 months that he's actually been happy to be here, and with lockdown and everything that happened, it really didn't affect him because he's like, well, I don't go out anyway, so I don't care.
Same thing for yes. I can understand his life didn't change. I'm going to ask you a personal question now, if you don't mind. It's only because I've spent 3 hours with you, I suppose, now in total. How's your relationship with him? Because you brought him back from a place he thought at the time he wanted to be, and that's a huge discussion about religion, heaven, hell, whether you believe it or whether you don't. That's another issue. But how's your relationship with him?
A lot better than it was. We've been through our own times as well where, and me obviously leaving the UK and coming to Mexico, and that's a whole different reason. That was because my boyfriend's American and I couldn't get straight into America. I had to come via Mexico. So me leaving and things like we have a very, very, very open relationship. There is nothing that isn't said between us. We are able to have very deep and meaningful conversations because once you've been through something like that with someone, our bond is like this, you know. It's completely unbreakable. We're very similar. We talk maybe once every couple of weeks, you know. It's like he's 21. He's just like I'm his mum. It's normal.
Tell me about it. You know, I still think of my kids as being sort of somewhere between 4 and 6.
I know.
They're so grown up, and in my head, I think I'm going to still put my daughter on the side of the bathroom and take the gravel out of her knee when she fell off a bike.
Yeah, exactly. Things change, don't they? The relationship changes as you become older.
Hard to let go, though. Hard to let go. It's a real mental something I would like to say, Callie, and you've really underlined something I know Phil feels strongly about, I feel strongly about, and all the team about Men's Radio Station. Mental health is a very real issue.
Yeah.
Your son has been, I'm going to say, literally to hell and back. You have been to hell and back. I think people watching and listening are going, what the? And they're like this, because it's a horrendous story. It's got a wonderful ending, but it's a horrendous, frightening, scary, visceral story. When you say that your son is suffering from PTSD, totally understandable, which is the real side of mental health, which makes me, and I know Phil, go into an absolute fury and a rage when some chat show host gets a bit miffed on television and then says, I've got PTSD. No, you bloody haven't.
Yeah.
This is what drives me nuts. This is the real point of Men's Radio, the real point about looking unflinchingly at the true aspects of mental health. I think you're a shining example. But
Thank you.
Out of your story, Callie, springs so much about, do we do the right thing even though it's illegal? And then you look at the spiritual side. Is there actually something there, which is incredible that your son was having those visions? And cynics could say, well, he was off his face and so many drugs. Of course he was having bloody visions. But, you know, and other people say, that is beautiful. What a wonderful thing to think that that might be waiting for you. It's an inspiring tale. How long are you going to be in Mexico for?
We go over.
I'm thinking of my next holiday with Phil. So I'm just,
well, do you know what? It's so much cheaper here than it is in the UK. It's like it's been so much cheaper for me to live here. So the work that I do and the consulting that I do with people now to help them with their own issues, because that's what I do now. I talk to people every day about their own issues because I can understand. You know, I've got a huge range of knowledge and experiences, not you know, with all sorts of things. And so yeah, we'll be going into the States at the beginning of June to go back and see Jesse's parents and go hang out there for a little while. So, but honestly, if you ever wanted to come to Mexico, it's so cheap, it's so lovely. It's I still actually haven't seen a lot of Mexico because I don't really go out because I spend all day working. You know, that life hasn't stopped. I'm not on holiday. I wish I was. You know, but I'm lucky that I'm able to do what I do remotely from anywhere in the world. So. Yeah, and you know, having my own CBD brands was very much inspired, although there's zero THC, so it's completely legal. It was very inspired by my own journey with cannabis. Like I have a lemon haze, which Veronica, I think, has just spoken about, a lemon haze infused tincture, which lemon haze was the strain that we gave my son in Spain that turned his mental health around. So lemon haze was an absolute, I have to have that for people who are suffering with mental health. There's lemon haze. There's a purple punch for people who are suffering from insomnia. So I've tried very hard, although I've had to stay within the legal parameters, and I'm happy to do so. I've tried very hard to give you a full whole plant experience without the full plant.
Callie, can I ask you this? Yes. You're obviously an expert. Could you make something up for me because I suffered with Phil Dave?
I'm sure there's a strain out there.
Have you got like a holler haze? I want a holler haze that I could just rub on my temples 3 times a week.
Yeah, and on that note, Callie Blackwell, you are quite extraordinary, as is your son, clearly. Just remind us one more time the name of the book.
It's The Boy in 7 Billion, and it's available on Amazon and all over the place at the cupboard online. And my CBD range is the activistcbd.co.uk. So you can have a look on there as well if you want to. And shoot me a message anyway. If you have any issues, any questions, I'm always on the end of the phone, always got this thing strapped to my face. Happy to help anybody in any way I can. My whole reason for doing everything I do is because I don't want people to suffer the same way that I had to. I don't want my son's pain to be for nothing.
Do you know what? I can honestly say that your story, I remember it sort of when it was sort of covered quite considerably nearer the time of when you were all going through this. And I might say that it took me a while to cotton on because your hair is looking decidedly less.
I've gone au natural now. Yeah, I've decided that chemicals, you know, if I'm going to preach that chemicals are no good to go into our bodies, I can't be putting chemicals in my head, you know. So yeah, back to the au natural.
Reasoning.
Yeah, me too. I'm thinking about natural as well.
Oh, I have a few in there, Russ.
Can I stop? Callie, thank you so much. Thank you for getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning in Mexico.
You're welcome.
Bless you. Thank you so much for joining us, and I know we'll speak again. I know you will.
Absolutely.
Hugely popular. Wish you well. Bye, Callie. Bye.
Oh, it nearly went through the whole interview without the phone dropping, and there it was, just right at the last minute.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that everybody reacted the way that I've reacted twice to Callie Blackwell. I think she's an extraordinary human being, and I think goes to the very heart of everything that Phil, myself, and all the team at Men's Radio and Women's Radio are trying to do.
Yeah, and look, once again, I'm sorry to be the bore, but I have to tell you that we do have to encourage you to work within the legal parameters. Whether you agree with them, whether you don't, it's not up to us to say that. It is the law, and I'm afraid you do have to respect that is the case until it potentially changes. And might I say, with individuals like Callie out there who are fighting the good fight, who knows, it may be sooner rather than later that it does. But anyway.
And if you think I'm going to be sarcastic, you're completely wrong. I'm not. Phil is absolutely right. So you have to live within the law. That's the end.
Now I know Callie can work miracles. You've just said I'm absolutely right. Good grief.
Right. You are right. You have to stay within the law. That's how it is.
Anyway, well, if you do want any more information on Callie, then you could always go to her website, which is theactivistcbd.co.uk. That's all got time for today's program. But of course, we're back on Friday at 11 o'clock. Do you remember? It's a 3-hour program.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You never know, I might even have a computer that works by then, but I'm really quite happy with the phone.
We'll give it some cannabis oil, see what happens. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. We do appreciate all of your comments today. We really appreciate you just, well, frankly, sticking with, because what an incredible show. Thank you, Callie. Speak to you on Friday at 11. Bye.
Bye, everyone.